Thank you, Alia, for that speech. And we're now going to turn to our final speaker for the opposition and our last speaker for the evening, Kareena Talwar. Kareena is a postgraduate student studying for a Master's of Law at Girton College, and she's also just been called to the bar this year. Kareena, you have the ears of the House. Thank you.
Before I begin, members of the House, I want you all in this room to take a moment to look around you, to look in front of you, to look behind you, to look at me and see the diversity in this room. Because we, to some extent, are a cross-section of what Britain looks like today. And I'd like to thank the floor speaker who spoke earlier, who spoke about the motion today being, this House believes Britain is divided more than ever. My argument today focuses on racial and religious divide. When looking at current events, it is easy to feel that we are on the brink of irreparable racial tension and division. Division created by an intolerance and hatred for different races and religions, fear of the other. Yes, we live in a country that has difficult challenges, where tensions have risen. I'm not glossing over the fact that racial inequalities persist, but we must ask ourselves, are these inequalities a reflection of a Britain that is more divided than ever, or are they a result of deep-rooted and historical inequalities that cannot be resolved so easily? Because what cannot be denied is the progress we've made to unite this country in embracing a diversity of religions, cultures, and races. If we look closely, we will find Britain is not divided more than ever. And to prove that, I'm going to take you back to the 1950s and 60s, when hundreds and thousands of individuals from the Commonwealth countries came to the UK in hope to find a better life. A better life in a country that they regarded as theirs. One of these individuals was my grandmother, who'd come from Kenya at the age of 19 alone. But her and many others were greeted with signs saying, "No Irish, no blacks, no dogs." They were greeted with the race riots in the 1970s to the 1980s, riots that took place in my hometown in London, a town called Southall, also known as Little India. The Southall race riots saw clashes between the South Asian migrants, the National Front, and the police. Hundreds were arrested, approximately £30,000 worth of damages to family businesses and to buildings, and more tragically, the death of anti-racist campaigner and teacher Blair Peach. I still hear stories from my grandmother's brothers about these riots and the dangers that they and many others put themselves in for defending black or brown men who were complete strangers to them. And the fact that they couldn't tell whether they were being attacked from the police or the National Front. Then, of course, there were the riots in Brixton that saw more than 300 people injured, 28 buildings destroyed, and many more from Toxteth, Liverpool to Handsworth, Birmingham. Because that was the reality of Britain at the time. That was a divided Britain. But there was change. Change to the Race Relations Acts from 1965 to 1976, the first UK laws to address discrimination, prohibiting it from public places, the employment sector, housing. It provided a solidified legal definition of what discrimination was and provided legal pathways for individuals to bring their claims to the courts. Today, members of the House, we have the Equality Act in 2010, a statute so powerful it protects all forms of discrimination, a statute I have used firsthand when I've represented cleaners in the employment courts from discrimination against their employers. In the criminal courts, those who have committed racially or religiously aggravated offences have higher maximum penalties. In fact, Only within the first quarter of this year, 85% of those prosecuted for hate crimes were successfully convicted, showing the strength of these laws. Now, you may think I've just contradicted myself. I've just proven that hate and division still persists in this country with this statistic. I recognise that as progressive as these laws are, their power can only be enforced by the will of the British public, by the changes in social attitudes, but change we have seen in Britain time and time again. The truth is, there are so many examples that Britain stands up when we are faced with division. The Black Lives Matter protest stemming from the death of George Floyd in the US, at the height of the pandemic, saw people in the UK from all ethnicities and backgrounds, white, brown, black, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, united against systemic racism. More than 260 towns and cities held protests from London to Monmouth in South Wales to Shetland in Scotland. In Bristol, the Colston Four took down the statue of Edward Colston, a slave trader. But this taking of the statue did not just stop there. It had a wider effect. It sparked educational institutions to revise their curricula to ensure diverse perspectives were being taught in the classrooms. It also triggered the Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm from the Mayor of London to revise who should be commemorated in public places and for Britain to take accountability. And speaking of the Mayor of London, if we were so divided, how did we go from Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech and the mass support it garnered to this country having the first Muslim Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to the Conservative Party having the first Nigerian female lead, Kemi Badenoch, to this country having the first UK, British, Asian Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak? Whatever your opinion of these individuals may be, and believe you me, I have many, you cannot deny that there are too many firsts I've just stated to say that Britain is more divided than ever. It cannot be denied that the very presence of these individuals in these positions is a sign of change, is a sign of acceptance and unity, not a sign of division. When the Grenfell Tower fire happened in 2017, I acknowledge that it revealed long-standing issues we have with housing inequality. But what was the response? People from all backgrounds united to support survivors. Ordinary citizens filling leisure centres and beyond with food, clothing, funds, socioeconomic lines, racial, religious lines did not matter. However, more importantly, this unity led to practical changes, whereby now the use of combustible materials in high-rise buildings is banned. So yes, every time I drive over the Hammersmith flyover and I see the green heart draped around Grenfell Tower, I'm reminded of the atrocities that took place. I know the systemic issues that still are present. However, I'm also reminded of the strength of the British public who came together to hold governing bodies to account and demand justice. Those for the motion today will no doubt have in mind the anti-immigration demonstrations and riots that took place this year. They'll say, no, we are divided more than ever. But in comparison to the historical events I mentioned earlier that took place over many years, this was just a temporary blip cleared quickly. A blip that was cleared by the robust and rapid action by our justice system that was willing to keep the courts open for 24 hours to ensure those who committed racist crimes were put behind bars, proving that law is on the side of unity. A blip that was cleared away by the counter-protest with anti-racism demonstrators spreading their support for immigrants, for refugees, for advice centres, for law centres, up and down this country with 2,000 counter-protests in Brighton to 1,500 people in Bristol and London, all chanting racism off our streets. It got to a point where the anti-immigration protesters feared the unity of the British public, many not even showing up to their planned protests. It showed the unity of Britain. Now, I'm not saying Britain is perfect. I recognise the blatant and covert racial tension that occurs. It is inherent in every society, especially one as diverse as ours. In fact, if we didn't have plurality in our thoughts, then we wouldn't be the democracy we are today. There will always be debate and disagreement, and so there should be. But to say we are divided at our core more than ever is just not the case. The fact we are able to have this uncomfortable conversation today is a testament to the change we have made. Not about how divided we are, but how more accepting, more active, more willing to change, and more aware we are. That, members of the House, is progress. Because when I stand in front of you today as a brown, state school educated female, I do so not because of divisions, but because of the great strides we have made as a society. There is a long way to go, but let's not forget how far we have come. We are in the midst of a process that can hurt, that can be unbearably slow, but it is a process, and we will get there, and we are bridging those gaps, because the truth that cannot be denied, members of this House, is that this is not a divided kingdom, but a united kingdom. And it has been more united than it ever was. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina, for that speech. And with that, our debate this evening draws to a close. As you may know, in this House, we vote with our feet, so I invite everyone here to cast their vote by walking through the corresponding door on their way out. Furthermore, if you gave a floor speech and didn't quite give me your name and college, please do come and find me at the end so we can get back in touch with who's won the floor speech prize for this week. And also do stick around to hear the results announced in the foyer directly outside the chamber. But would you join me in giving one more round of applause for all our speakers?